Going into the last round of the Tal Memorial, Caruana was leading the tournament, a half-point clear of Radyabov and Carlsen. Now Radyabov was playing against Nakamura, and well, they had quite a solid game, and the game ended fairly quickly in a draw. Caruana was playing Aronian, and very quickly Aronian built up an excellent attacking position and had a huge time advantage, so Caruana was on the ropes. So if Carlsen could win his last round game, there was a chance he could win the tournament. Let's take a look at his game. He was playing with the black pieces against Luke McShane, who's had quite an impact on the tournament, beating Kramnik in the previous round. So here we go. Let's go from the very beginning. E4 from Luke as normal, and it's a Spanish. Now instead of the Berlin, Carlsen plays more of a mainline Spanish today. I think maybe he wanted to keep winning chances alive. Now here, of course, Rook E1 is the main line of the Spanish, and so on, and you can play D6 or castles. But Luke played his favourite variation. This is the so-called delayed exchange in the Rider pairs. So black recaptures with the D pawn, and now you can't take here. Well, you can, but it leads to absolutely nothing after knight takes E4. But D3. Now this is a very different kind of game to the normal mainline Spanish positions. The point is that white sets up this barrier of pawns in the middle of the board and tries to make use of this very healthy pawn structure by breaking with the F pawn. Well, we'll see how things develop in a second. So first of all, there is a threat to the E pawn which black has to deal with. Now Luke played his favourite variation, B3. And yeah, he's tried this out several times and actually has very good results with it. It often leads to very long manoeuvring games. So there's a threat to the E pawn, and F6 played by Carlsen. And now at knight C3. Luke's previously played knight D2 there, but knight C3 is similar. Rook E8. Okay, basically this makes room for the knight to swing round. Carlsen's manoeuvring at this stage, I think, was excellent. So C5, this is clamping the D4 square. And now we start to see McShane's plan. He's making way for the F pawn. If he can get this move in and trade pawns, then he'll have a very pleasant pawn structure. This pawn structure here remains solid in the middle, and then you try to play on the king side, possibly in an endgame. So Carlsen continues his manoeuvre. Now this is very standard to bring the knight to E6 to look at the D4 square. McShane brought the knight in, and now bishop F8. Well, that's the other reason why you play the rook to E8. Not only to manoeuvre the knight, but it does allow the bishop to drop back to this excellent square F8, where it protects G7, makes room for the rook here, and keeps out of the knight's range. So this is all very sound play from Carlsen. Now, McShane could break here with F4, but probably after knight takes, then black plays bishop takes knight, and here, well, white's pawn structure has been damaged. Well, it's still not bad, but there isn't this beautiful protection. Obviously the E file is open, and there's no real point to the pawn on F5. It's clear that black's pieces are very good here. Well, certainly white is basically fighting for equality. So I think F4 immediately isn't so good. So therefore McShane played knight E3. Excuse me, just 1 second. So just eliminating the possibility of bishop takes knight. That's very sensible, and the knight is very good on E3, controlling some very nice squares here. So you can see this, it's a long manoeuvring game. Knight D4, excellent move from Carlsen. Of course, if this knight is ever taken, for example knight takes, then you recapture, and now we've got a position that's very similar to the King's Indian. King's Indian reversed, of course. But in this case, with the bishop poorly placed on b2 and white's kingside play, well, it hasn't even got off its starting blocks, it's clear that black stands very well here. You're going to get in c4 very quickly indeed, and yeah, black has a big advantage there. So this is McShane's problem. He doesn't really want to take the knight on d4, but if he leaves the knight there, then this is an absolute pain, of course, to have this knight, you know, peering over your ramparts. So okay, he played f4. Now he's trying to get the desired pawn structure. If Carlsen takes, then this is what white wants, because suddenly, you know, you've got a bit of play on the king side. You're chipping away at black's control over d4. You know, you can play queen d2, double on the f file, and this is a favourable pawn structure for white. It's still not bad for black, but white has reasons to be optimistic there. But Carlsen played perfectly. He played bishop e6, didn't allow that. And now here's a big decision for white. Do you hold the position? Do you hold the pawn on f4? Do you capture, or do you push on? Let's see what happens if you push on. The bishop will drop back, and in essence this is rather similar to these King's Indian positions again. Black is still going to do the same thing. Black is going to play b5, queen here, maybe rook here, and go for the c4 break eventually. And although, you know, white can attempt something on the king side, I think black's play here in the middle is just too quick, and again this bishop is not in a great place. So I think, yeah, I can understand why McShane didn't want to go for that. Instead he traded on e5. I mean, maybe there was an argument for just holding the position, but okay, he took and played knight g1. Now this is the first step in trying to get rid of that knight on d4. g6, excellent move from Carlsen. It means the bishop can sometimes come here to protect the e pawn, but sometimes can come to h6, looking out here. So, and also the pawn on g6 controls the f5 square, so there's never going to be any nonsense with knight f5. Okay, so this was McShane's idea. He wanted to drive away the knight. That's fine, but of course that comes at a price, namely that the d3 pawn is now weaker. So, you know, there's always a bit of pressure there. And again, what is that bishop doing on b2? You know, it's locked in. It would like to come out to these dark squares here, but the knight is in the way. So, and look at the two positions actually. It seems to me that Carlsen's position and his pieces are a kind of picture of harmony. You know, nothing, they don't get in the way of each other. Okay, knight f3 from McShane, bishop g7, excellent. Just keeping hold of that and guarding the dark squares here. Queen e1. Okay, well this is where McShane starts to go for it. He wants to shift the queen over to the king side, understandable, to try and attack maybe this isolated pawn and maybe try to get the knight over to g4. Fair enough, but you can see that this d pawn is vulnerable. Now McShane played, Carlsen played very well here. He did not take this tempting pawn. You could do, but the queen is driven offside, and suddenly white has rather a potent initiative. You know, this queen is miles from the action, and there's queen h4 coming, and you can see all white's pieces, well, minus the bishop here, are very active here. So Carlsen did very well here and declined that pawn. Instead he came up with a very simple plan, a5, excellent move. So just chipping away at white's pawn structure. Of course, normally you would like to play a4 to block this attack, but this pawn is en prise. Okay, let's go back. So, after a5, rook d1 was played, protecting the d pawn now, and then just a4, threatening the pawn on b3. McShane exchanged, but now he's left with a horrible isolated pawn, and Structure is not looking good, and still the bishop seems to have got even worse actually. Okay, Carlsen just played very coolly indeed. He doesn't need to go crazy here. He's got the superior structure, he's got two bishops, he needs to hold the position, very simply. And now he recycled the rook, because rooks need to connect, they need to be together. And the rook has done its job on the A file, there's nothing more to be achieved there. Queen G3 from McShane, and he's lunging now. He was, as is traditional for him, he was short of time, and Carlsen was playing quite fluently, quite quickly. So McShane was short of time and just kind of goes for it now. I think he realised if he'd sat there he was going to get slowly outplayed. But now came bishop b3, and you could hang on to the d pawn by playing rook d2, but this is really ugly. For example, bishop h6, and now simply queen d7, connecting the rooks, and I think black has a very, very nice position here. Not a lot of fun to play, particularly when you're short of time for white. So McShane played rook e1 and gave up the d pawn, but as compensation he has at least managed to activate his pieces. Look, the bishop is now playing, these knights are playing, the queen is in the game. But Carlsen was solid, just brought the bishop back, very nice move, just didn't panic at all, didn't snatch at a pawn, just make sure everything is solid. So a check, king came in the corner, queen h4, another good move, just making sure everything's protected. The point is that there are pins on the f file here. So after bishop g5 takes, you can't play knight takes, of course, because of the back rank mate. This is why Carlsen left the queen here. Instead of greedily grabbing another pawn, he's made sure that the queen has remained on d3 looking at the rook on f1. So queen g5 and king g7, and actually white's initiative is very easy to take care of here. Queen came back, rook f4, again not trying to grab any pawns, just keeping very active, and of course cutting off communication here. So Carlsen is a pawn up. White's pawns are hopelessly damaged on the queen side. This one is weak. All black's pieces are active. He's maintained, in football you could say he's maintained his shape. Carlsen's pieces are just still working together very effectively, communicating well. Queen c4, still keeping an eye on that rook. And well, now Carlsen was just flowing. Everything works beautifully. Bishop drops back, but now there's an enormous problem with the knight. And the rook comes in, and we're even threatening stuff like queen a2, and it's all over. Well, McShane played knight f5, giving up the knight, but this is hopeless. There was a check on g5, but after this the time control had been reached. Not that Magnus Carlsen was in any great time pressure, but McShane had time to consider his position, and he resigned the game. A very responsible game from Carlsen there. He didn't do anything particularly flashy, but he put his pieces on solid squares and basically dealt with Luke McShane's attempts at creating complications very well indeed. So, at the end of the tournament, Aronian had beaten Caruana, Radyabov had only drawn, so Magnus Carlsen wins the Tal Memorial Tournament with 5.5 points out of 9. Incredibly, a half point ahead of Caruana and Radyabov on 5 out of 9. So once again, Magnus Carlsen comes good at the end of a tournament. He snuck through. This was a fantastic tournament. So many interesting games, and the lead changing hands on many occasions, so it's good stuff. I hope you enjoyed these video clips. If you did, please do subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I'll be posting more clips in the near future, so hopefully you'll join me then. Thanks a lot.